Hello everyone. So for my new game project, I needed a train, so I made this little train here. There's the front wagon there, the brighter Godot node is the train, and all the other things you see following it are wagons that will just follow the train. I figured I would show how I did this in case someone else might find this useful. Um, you will see how you can generate a path from a tile map, and also how you can make a path follow train like this. Yes, so let's first take a look at the tile map. I have this tile map here with a single auto tile. If I adjust the tile map, like for instance like this, you will see that once I'm in game again, the train will automatically follow the new path because the path is generated from the tile map. There's currently a single restriction, and that is that every path on the tile map has to be a closed loop. But of course, this could easily enough be modified or adjusted depending on your needs. So let's first start by looking at the script for the tile map itself. The tile map has this script here, and the only thing it does is already it calls this create train path. The first thing this does is get all the used cells in the tile map and add them to this list. Then we just check if while there are still cells in this list, we just pick the first cell and we start creating a path from this cell. So what it does is it just creates a path that it adds as a child of the tile map. It adds this to a group because I want to look for this path somewhere else in my code. You'll see later. Then I add a new curve, which eventually will be added to this path. And then I start by adding the starting cell here. As you can see here, we set it into the next cell, and then we add this to the curve. And how I do this is I convert the cell to a world position, and then I add half of the cell size so that the path point will be in the center of the cell. Then we simply remove this from the used cells, this list, so that it won't be picked up again, and then we try to find the next cell. And to find the next cell, we just look one to the left, up, right, and down in that order. And if there is a cell there, we return it. If not, we return this empty cell, which is just a vector with a random location, which will probably never be used. The reason I do this is because you can't have a null in a vector, and vector 2, 0, so 0, 0 might be actually used by the path, so I can't use that either. So this loop just keeps going until until it encounters an empty cell, at which point it adds the first point once again to close the path, and then it's done. And it will repeat that for every path on the tile map. So that's it for creating the path. If you go back to Godot, you will see I have this start here. So let's have a look at the start. This is where, as you can see, this is train starting position. It's where the train is spawned in. So I can just move this wherever I want, and the train will be spawned in at that location on the path. So how is this done? If we go to train start position, you can see I have here one property to set up many wagons to spawn, which we'll look at in a moment. So this start thing here has a timer that just calls back every 0.3 seconds to the script. And if we look at what happens on timeout, I simply look to see if there are any paths in the train path group. And if there is one, I will just get the first path in the group. So this is kind of a bit of debug code now. It assumes that there is no more than one path. And then I will get the closest offset on this path to this where this node is placed. So an offset on a path, for those who don't know, if I add a path here and just add some points, doesn't really matter, I can close it. Then I add a path follow, and under that path follow we add a sprite. So you see this path follow has an offset, and this offset, okay, I need to set this sprite to 0, 0, so that it's a bit easier to see. 0.1, so it's not so massive. So if you look at this offset variable here, this is where you are on the path. So 0 is where you started, and then whatever the max is, it will be something depending on the length of your path. So if your path is longer, oops, I didn't want to add, I wanted to move. So if your path is longer, the offset value will be higher, or you have this unit offset, which is always a value from 0 to 1, but I use this offset instead. So if we now go back into in here, you can see I've just asked the curve to get me the closest offset to the position of this node, and then I call this spawn train at this for this path at this offset. And the spawn train simply loads my train scene, creates an instance of it, adds it as a child of the path because it's a path follow, so it needs to be a child, and then it sets the offset to this offset. And then it tells the train to spawn in the wagons. So let's have a look at the train. The train itself is a simple path follow script. It has a very simple physics process. You can ignore this. These are simply the controls that I use, so you only really need to look at these 3 lines. What this does is just takes the current speed and multiplies it by the delta, and then it moves forward on the offset by that amount, and then it sends this move event. So if you saw it, my train is inheriting from this pathfall script, which my wagon also inherits from, and this has a single event here that is on train moved that sends a single float. So when we send this move event, we send this on train moved. And what's happened then is that my wagons, this is my wagon script, which also have inherits from the path follow. The wagon script, you can set the follow target, which is another path follow script. And what it does when you set the follow target is that it simply registers or it subscribes to this on-train move event. And when that's moved, it adjusts its own position by the same amount as the whatever was in front of it moved, and then it sends the move event again. So then when I spawn in the wagons here, you will see this was called from the train. Sorry, it was called from the train start position here. It was called on the train. I call spawn wagons. And then I just check if we need to spawn more wagons. So if the count is larger than 1, I spawn in a wagon. I add it as a child of the path because it's also a path follow. I set the offset to be minus 15. This is mainly for testing, but it's an okay distance, so it's a little bit behind whatever the current object is. I set the follow target, and then I just call spawn wagons again with minus 1 on the count, and with this as the new follow target. So that means that if you look in the game, if we stop this train, the first wagon is following the train, the wagon after that is following the wagon after the train, and so on. So they're all just following whatever is in front of them. So when the train moves, it sends an event, on move event, that will be picked up by this wagon, which sends it to this wagon, and so on and so on and so on. And that way, the train is actually the one deciding how the movement goes. So everything else just follows the train. And that way you always have them, no matter how fast you move or what you do, everything else will always be following exactly behind the train without any issues. Alright, so that's pretty much how I set up my train. So I have an automatic path creator, then I have a train spawner that can spawn in the train and spawns in wagons, and then the train itself is incredibly simple. It just simply sends out an event when it moves, and it moves along the offset, and then the wagons just pick up this event and pass it on to the next wagon. Of course, there could be other ways to set up a train. If someone else has any better ideas on how to do this, then please feel free to share so in the comments. Alright, that was it for this time. If you have any questions, just post them in the comments and I'll try to answer the best I can.